Look, I don't want to make the first question of the evening uncomfortable for you, but I think in the final week of sitting of the Federal Parliament last year, you went to Canberra, just to, nothing, not doing the numbers. You were just in Canberra, completely innocently. You were supposed to play soccer, but COVID meant you couldn't. So you just happened to end up going from MP's office to MP's office to MP's office. Now, was there any chance that the name Tanya Plibersek was being used? Albo, Shorten? How's that leadership going of each way, Albo?
Look, it's just great that the ALP have got so many strong candidates on their front bench. We are brimming with talent, and it's been a very tough 12 months for, well, probably even longer, to be fair. Albo's leadership has been swamped by, first of all, the bushfires, which we'll remember were a terrible catastrophe, and the country wanted a focus on helping and working their way through the bushfires. And then COVID came crashing down. And again, the people of Australia didn't want to see cheap politics. They wanted to see a constructive position being taken by both parties. And I think Albo achieved that. But in achieving that, you play yourself a little bit out of the game. So almost half of Albo's entire 3 years that he has to prepare for the leadership, you get a circumstance where he's not able to put up policy alternatives. So the Labor Party has suffered because we've done the right thing. Albo's got behind the COVID bushfire response, the COVID response, but it has been damaging in terms of wanting to raise his profile and set a strong policy agenda.
So how long has he got?
The Albo, I think, will lead us to the next election. That's genuinely what I believe. The ALP is putting its foot forward on a bunch of policy initiatives that will be rolled out over the next 6 to 9 months. There's wild speculation at the moment. The election could be held in September, October of this year, despite the Prime Minister promising faithfully that he would go a full term. You could see from the parliamentary calendar that there's just this big gap for no reason at all. I was in Parliament 20 years. I'm very familiar with how the parliamentary calendar is set out, and this was a very unusual gap in the sitting year. So the speculation started running because the Prime Minister set aside this huge gap.
Joe, I'm fluent in politician and former politician. I heard a lot of endorsement there for the leader.
Anthony Albanese is the leader, and I support the leader.
Okay, so currently Essential Poll, which is sort of a lefty-leaning one, which gets printed via The Guardian, right? 47%. That's the support Albo has as preferred Prime Minister with Labor voters.
Yeah, but look, again, I think Stephen Conroy actually makes a good point, but in a sense, there was nothing. Albo was unbackable to win during the bushfires. And that was nothing to do with him. That was to do with the bushfires. You just take away all the human cost, the carnage, the economic fallout. We all know they were awful, just like the COVID thing. But just looking at it purely politically, the bushfires were absolutely homicidal for Scott Morrison. There was no way he was ever going to recover unless he got something of a political miracle. And COVID-19 effectively provided that political miracle. He had a chance in another disaster, an even bigger disaster. And who could have pictured a bigger disaster in the middle of the bushfires? He had to prove himself in an even bigger disaster to be a leader because he'd failed so miserably in the previous one. And again, there was nothing. Albo didn't do anything wouldn't have done anything to become Prime Minister if COVID hadn't come along, but he would have been. And again, with COVID-19, there's nothing he can do. Now, the question, there is certainly, and I will tell you for a fact, there are rumblings in the party about the leadership, absolutely. But what next? No, not among well, see, this is the problem. This is what you might call the Corbyn paradox or the structural decline that Joel Fitzgibbon talks about. So, Tanya Plibersek, I like very much. I know her. I think I admire the way she reaches out across the political divide. She'll talk to Alan Jones when others won't. But she will not carry the votes that Labor is losing in the suburbs and the regions. Everyone I know who's a white-collar lawyer living in the inner city, they love her. But people out in the burbs, there's a sort of running rule of thumb that 8 kilometres...
Paddington and Penrith.
8 kilometres from the CBD, no one knows who she is, and no one particularly wants that. You say that Albo doesn't have cut through at the moment. Tanya Plibersek, extremely capable, extremely competent, but does she really have that massive dynamism and star power, if you like, that Albo is being criticised for not having? Everyone in the party is looking to Chalmers, and talking about the right of the party, obviously.